All right, briefer intro this time to just say that I'll start the presentation now, and that then we'll have discussion afterwards. You guys have the context, but the other recording may not get attached to this one, but that'll be okay. So here we go. Does it work this time? Oh, wait, it's not allowing me to again. Come on. I did this already. Okay, Benji, I'm gonna have you record because it won't allow me to.
Okay.
It didn't accept my setting changes.
I'll just record to the cloud. Does that work for you?
Yeah, and then I can get it from,
Yeah.
because it's Penny's account that we're using.
Okay.
So she can get it for me. Just adds an extra step. Right,
We're recording.
except now make me co-host so I can do screen sharing. I should have made you a co-host. Yay,
Got it.
technology for the win.
Hooray.
All right, now let's see if it lets me do it this time. Yay, it looks like it worked. Boom. Wow, okay. So here we go. Barichara Updates number 4. There. Except I forgot to do this. This thing stays there, which is annoying once I do that. Okay, so first thing I want to tell you is that this beautiful flower, or really a seed pod, comes from the gake tree. And I just wanted you to see it and admire the beauty of a native endemic species that you can only see by coming to visit us in Barichara, because it doesn't exist anywhere else on Earth. So just thought I'd begin there. Isn't that beautiful? All right, with that said, today we're going to explore 4 topics that we're moving forward on all at the same time. How we're prototyping a way of educating children differently, which is something that we're doing informally at the moment to solve some household and family challenges and address some long-standing concerns we've had about how we want Elise to be raised and what we think is needed for children to be prepared for the future. We're also going to give some updates about our reforestation efforts and the work in syntropic agroforestry. And then kind of a big update on the Territorial Foundations and how that's moving forward. And then a little bit about the regenerative finance work, which is really about connecting back out into the larger world and preparing for a satellite event in October. And I know Antonio's here now. I don't know if he'll be here long enough, since he said he's at the airport, that he may contribute to part of that if he's still around. But first, I want to tell you what's happening with the way we're approaching educating our children. And this is something that I think is really, really delicate and subtle, because the motivation for action in the last week really grew out of scheduling challenges that Penny and I have around who's watching Elise when we both have a lot to do, and just recognizing that we don't have any solutions that are both good for us and that serve the education of her and the kids that we see in the community. And this includes problems with the school she goes to, where she's learning bullying and consumerism, and how do we handle the interface between children when the larger mainstream culture is still mostly going in the wrong direction. And so this is a really delicate issue. And I just want to share you some of what we're doing and how we're starting to approach it. First of all, isn't this adorable? That's Elise. She's got her, her little shovel, and she and Penny are just about to plant a tree in the food forest. So that's Penny there with her gloves on, and they're doing a little bit of a project together. Oh my gosh, that's dog poop on my foot. Yuck. Yuck. Could you tell the story of what's happening while I'm washing my hands? That is so gross.
I can tell the story. So yeah, we're about to plant a tree here. And you can see I am starting to dig the hole, and Elise comes along in a minute and she digs the rest of the hole. And then that little tree is, you can see the black bag there. That's where the tree is. And we opened it up and put the tree in and filled it in. So that was what we were doing there. And here comes Joe.
Wow. So this is a good example of how much my life is improvisational. That just as I lifted my foot to put it on my knee, a big clump of dog poop landed on my thumb, and I didn't even know it was there. So welcome to Joe's life this week. I think that touching dog crap with my finger while sitting next to the computer, very far away from any dogs, is a good example of how unexpected and nonlinear everything is. The important thing I want to stress about what's happening here is that when we're together like this, it works beautifully. The challenge is that there isn't really a family system that enables this to happen continuously. And there isn't a way to connect between families. And so what we're trying to do with the kids is broken because the business models or the kinds of jobs that the families have keeps them from being able to spend their time with kids like this. And with all of the other responsibilities we have, it's hard for us to give consistent attention. As I look over at Elise, who's got headphones on, watching a movie on Netflix right now so we can have this call, just to show you like, it's that live, that real, this challenge we're facing. This isn't exactly what I want my daughter doing, but we don't really have a good solution. And I want to show you this picture, which comes back to when we first moved to Barichara 2.5 years ago. That's my friend Felipe on the left, and this is the Escuela del Bosque, the forest school. So when we first arrived for a few weeks, there was this beautiful engagement with about 15 families and all of the kids, immersing them in nature-based education, storytelling, eco-literacy, lots of powerful things. And it all ended when the pandemic hit. And so it's been more than 2 years since we've been able to successfully create a pattern where families and children are able to work together to give kids the education we know they need, even though there's so much capacity to do it here. And just to give you a sense of some of the things that we've been doing is, we really focus a lot on native plant identification and seed collecting. So there's some of those gake seeds that I showed in the initial picture, the first slide of this presentation. Creating tree nurseries, having the kids help to plant seeds, cultivate them, plant trees, teaching them water retention and reforestation practices. And of course, the very important solitude and self-knowledge and self-confidence that comes from just having unstructured time, lots of outdoor play. As you can see here, Elise is actually making a castle out of a house. The house was built by Ross Evans with his daughter, one of his daughters, and with Elise about a month ago when Ross was still here. And Elise still plays with the structure that they built from sticks that had fallen from the acacia magnum tree in the food forest. And so this use of natural objects and creative play, a strong focus on craft works, and of course, eco-literacy in the broadest possible sense. And so while we managed to do a lot of this, and those of you who saw the tour that I posted yesterday on Earth Regenerators of Elise explaining what's happening in the food forest, you can see that our 5-year-old knows more about reforestation than most adults on Earth. And still, we're nowhere close to what she needs, and nowhere close to what all these kids are going to need. And so what's really key here is that this ability for the kids to come together and play. And here's Elise with another friend named Maria Canella running together in the street. This ability for the kids to come together and play is greatly inhibited by the lack of support structures. And so one of the things that we've been exploring is how could we create an intervention that creates a whole system solution? And how can we evolve it? And so a lot of our focus on regenerative education that we're moving toward includes mixed ages. So the kids are different ages and includes kids and adults together. A deep focus in ecosystem restoration, as we've been doing in the food forest. Lots of nature immersion. Craft skills through workshops, like all of the indigenous weaving practices, bioconstruction practices, fermentation practices, cultivation of crops, processing of food or of plant materials to make medicines, all kinds of things that we could do with workshops, blended with a kind of homeschooling like Montessori or Waldorf, but also held together with community ceremonies and rituals. And so there are a lot of parts to this. And the way that we've been approaching it in the last week is that the thought had occurred to us at one point in time, we just didn't act on it, to try to find a person who could be an anchor like home tutor, like a kind of a mix of a babysitter, play date for Elise, someone who could help us and give us support just in watching Elise when we need her, need them to watch her so we can get other things done, but also someone who has pedagogical training that could teach her to read and write, that can help her learn social skills, that can teach her cooperation instead of competition. And we had a wonderful young woman who was here last year named Milena, who's a school teacher that's no longer at a school. And in October, we had Sebastian Meisner come here and stay for 5 months. And during both of those times, or during the time for both those people, Milena offered after school activities helping the kids learn social skills and good social and emotional development and teaching them cooperative games. And Sebastian actually played a temporary support role to me and Jessica as we were separating, to be a sort of friend, live-in uncle, play date, part-time teacher for Elise. And then he later did this for our friend Margarita and her son Luca. And we were prototyping with Sebastian a way of working with entire families and working across families to help them come into coherence with each other. So the work we're doing now is this woman, Milena, who's been in Spain for the last 6 months, is coming back to Barichara in about 2 weeks. So our preparation right now is just conversations, getting on the same page about the idea, like what if we hired a full-time tutor that is not a full-time tutor just as a tutor, but as someone who provides social support, someone we can work with in a nexus of 2 or 3 families and prototype together learning activities. And then connect them to workshops that happen in one of the other schools. There's a school here called La Quincha that offers workshops to kids that are between the age of like 7 and 12, and that we could tag along and participate in. Or there's an alternative school Elise goes to called Totumo, which is really just a place where they go and play and do arts and crafts. But because there's so much trauma in the culture here, there's a lot of bullying behavior, and we have to try to help her at least unlearn the bad habits she's learning there. Because really what we need to do is bring social skills training to that school if Elise is going to be there, and bring it to all the parents and the teachers. And that won't just be done in the school setting, it affects the entire community. And so I just wanted to share that we're starting to build up this dialogue where in mid-July, when Milena returns, to talk to her about creating a position where she acts as a social support, like a teacher support and family support person for a nexus of 2 or 3 families. And that we could begin prototyping together some of this larger regenerative education patterning. And then when Sebastian is able to return, probably in December or January, we're already talking with him about how this is the focus for his life's work and something that's deep in his heart and that I worked with him on when he was here before. And so, like I said, we're in a preparatory stage, but I just wanted to share with you that this is starting to grow. And you can see how it's related to the ecoversity, because if we can't create social change patterns that work for entire families, they're not going to work for the community as a whole. And maybe during the discussion, if it feels appropriate, Penny could share some of her experiences interacting with single people who don't have kids and how different it is once you bring children and families into the mix. And just how profound of a blind spot it is for most regenerative work to not focus on family kids as entire complex systems. And this is like so important and so invisible to our industrialized, autonomous, and individualized adult world that I just can't stress enough how much we need to rebalance it. And so I just want to share a little bit of that and say that's going on. And in the meantime, we have a lot of reforestation efforts that just continue going. So for example, these sticks, which in Spanish are called estacas, are a type of tree that you can just cut off a branch, stick the branch in the ground, and it starts to grow. So here's a place where in the span of about 15 minutes, I created a living fence by taking these sticks and just sticking them around the perimeter of part of the food forest in an area where we'd already pulled the grass, and we were pushing the boundary of the invasive grass away. And here's going to become a perimeter of fence made with living trees. Another view of them you can see here is that even when they weren't in the ground yet, these sticks were starting to grow little leaves. Each leaf will become a branch, and these will grow into entire trees. This is something that's really powerful about working in the tropics. Is there are trees like this you can plant at any time of year, and they grow quite easily, literally by poking a hole in the ground and sticking a stick there. And so these were extra tree sticks that we had from the syntropic agroforestry workshop that we used to create a living fence. And I just wanted to see another technique we're using in part of our reforestation efforts that's connected to the permaculture food forest and the syntropic agroforestry system. Also in the last week, we started doing a lot more active maintenance in the syntropic agroforestry system. And here what we're doing is between the lines, basically these canals of multi-diverse plants, 25 to 30 species of plants planted together. We're pulling the invasive grass and turning it into a green compost, just meaning we're taking the grass material and laying it next to the lines of plants to create a mulch layer. And so this is part of the idea of syntropy, is you take the plants right next to what you're growing and use them to recycle nutrients to accelerate the growth of the plants you want to grow and build soils for them. And we've been doing this throughout the whole area. And so because that project is pretty large, you can see here, we're clearing a lot of ground. And so in the span of 3 or 4 days, we've cleared about half of the total area with 4 or 5 of us working for 2 hours at a time. So that's just an active maintenance project that we're doing right now. But in the meantime, our syntropic agroforestry team started planning the next workshop that's going to be in the first week of August. It's going to be at a community garden that was created during a crisis moment during the pandemic, and currently is a place for people to learn food resilience among 16 campesino families. And so the focus on this next workshop is going to be continual crop production, so that the people there can learn how to grow plants that within a month produce food, while those that take 6 months to 12 months, like yucca, takes 6 to 12 months to get a yucca plant to a place where it can harvest, whereas beans and squash can grow in 30 to 45 days. And then there are other plants like fruit trees that take 5 to 8 years. And so the idea is to design a specific syntropic agroforestry system that combines beneficial food plants, where at any time you have food production.
They're going in a ship.
You have food
Look at their
production.
ship. That's a bunny ship.
And Elise is really excited about our movie sitting next to us. And so the idea is
And it
to,
goes right past them.
Elise,
lights
more
that
quiet,
are
please.
student.
More quiet, please. So the idea is to use this concept of syntropy, which is to have synchronicity in space and time, to have plants grow that continually produce food across timescales of months to years to decades, and to design that project in the combination of species that are planted and the way that the system is managed in this community garden that was created during the pandemic. And this is going to establish the second field site for ongoing learning. The first one's in the picture here, which is in the Bioparque. The second one is going to be in a place called La Huerta Comunitaria, the community orchard. That's in a rural zone called El Pino. And that we're going to invite the students from the first workshop to attend and be co-facilitators, while inviting new participants to be students, so that we can start deepening the learning in a kind of a cumulative fashion, because this will be our second workshop, as we're also co-designing a third workshop that'll take place later in August that focuses on watershed restoration in another part of the territory. So the idea is we're going to have 3 demonstration sites, all of them on community land in different parts of the territory, that create a repository of knowledge and different field sites and different focus. One of them on a native forest, which is the native forest ecosystem that's in the Bioparque, another one on continual food production in El Pino, and a third one in a place called Parameda, which will be focused on watershed restoration. The idea is, from the very beginning, we want to create diverse nodes of learning that are integrative and mutually supportive. And there's a lot of design that goes into this sequence of workshops. And this is the next one that's coming. And so the reason I'm telling you now is the planning included which species of plants, where do we get them, how much do we charge for the workshop, how do we give scholarships or other ways of encouraging local people to be the main people who attend, instead of people from the city who moved here who could afford to attend and have leisure time. We're trying to design as much as possible for primarily local people to attend the second workshop, because they're the food producers of the region. And we think there's going to be strong interest, but these are people who can't afford to pay for a workshop, and probably will have to pay them a day's wage of labor for each day they attend the workshop, because they have to not work on their own farms to work on this farm, or they have to not work for someone else's farm that's paying them to participate in the workshop. So we have to have really creative economic models for how these workshops work. And luckily, several members of our team have decades of experience in community development, working with campesino cultures in Colombia. So we have very deep sensitivity and awareness about how to do this. And this is all informing how the second workshop is going to take place. And so that's just a bit more about the reforestation efforts. There's a lot more going on, but maybe that gives us enough of a taste for now. What I think is the big news is what's happening with the territorial foundations, because the regenerative finance work, as you'll see, is really, we're just preparing for the future and taking some small steps at the moment. But the territorial foundations work is really taking a big leap forward. First, I want to say hello to Angela. This is Angela. She's part of the team, a new organization that's only 3 months old called Territoria. Territoria is a nonprofit organization set up as a typical foundation. It's not a territorial foundation. It's based in Colombia, and its mission is to support the development of territorial foundations in Colombia. So the history here is that last year, when we were doing all of our work with the Barichara Regeneration Fund, a few of us who were involved in that work were invited to participate in an online course about territorial foundations. At the end of that course in territorial foundations, several of us were asked if we would like to be founders of our own foundations in our own territories. 7 territories in Colombia said yes. One of them was Barichara. And the group that organized all of those workshops convened the 7 territories in Santa Marta in December. I was one of the people who attended that meeting. And between then and now, they've created an organization supported by a nonprofit or a foundation based in Ohio that's called the Charles Mott Foundation. And the Charles Mott Foundation supports community organizations and basically sovereignty of people in communities to guide their own development. And the Charles Mott Foundation has existed for more than 50 years, doing this work in multiple continents, including all over Latin America. And they've been working with groups in Mexico and Romania to create territorial foundations for the last 30 years. So one of the things that they've done is they've brought people like Augustine, who's this man sitting there in the back. Augustine is from Mexico. He has established 2 community foundations of his own. And by creating an umbrella organization for Mexico, sort of like the mother to Territoria, they have another group, another foundation in Mexico called Comunitaria. And Comunitaria is a foundation that supports territorial foundations in Mexico. And so Augustine has worked for 35 or 40 years, creating community organizations that help create this infrastructure for territorial development. And he came to help us learn how to cultivate service leadership and community philanthropy based on all of this experience. Now, I met Augustine when I was in Santa Marta in December, so I already knew how amazing he was. But yesterday, the local team here in Barichara, this guy sitting closest to the picture is Carlos Gomez, who's an amazing regenerative agriculture practitioner, and also has helped create cooperatives and social impact businesses. He's a true social entrepreneur. So people like Carlos getting to meet someone like Augustine, and for me just to get to watch them was sort of amazing. Because what we're learning is we're learning how to birth distributed governance with proven track records, with examples from all over the world. And here we're learning from the people in Mexico. And so what happened yesterday was our group that decided that we wanted to explore how to organize ourselves for the social and ecological regeneration of our territory. We came together for 3 half-day workshops in the last month, knowing that this event that happened yesterday was coming, when Territoria was going to come and bring Augustine, and that we get to have this dialogue. And so we met. We met in a hotel called La Nube, which is just Spanish for the cloud. And in La Nube, we gathered to discuss what are territorial foundations, how do you set them up, how do you create their advisory councils, how do you define who is a good executive director, what kinds of people come together to do this, what is the difference between a territorial foundation and every other model of civil society organization, how have they worked in different real world contexts. Suffice it to say, everyone was as blown away as I knew they were going to be, because I've been waiting for this to happen for the last 6 months. I've been waiting patiently since December, knowing what it would mean for these people to come into the room together. Just to give you a sense, the people of Territoria, I gave them a series of trainings on pro-social earlier this year, because they're the group that could gestate the birth of a pro-social training center for Colombia and later for Latin America, because they're a network of amazing social entrepreneurs, social impact investors, people who run community philanthropy, foundations, social impact businesses, just amazing people spread all over Colombia. And so yesterday we gathered and had this conversation. And then this man in the blue shirt named Nick, who's from the Charles Mott Foundation, he currently lives just outside of Ann Arbor, Michigan. Just as a funny little side note, I'm meeting Nick for the first time, and I mentioned something about community currencies, and he asks me if I know about the one in Ann Arbor. And I say, huh, I have a friend named Chad Monfreda, who I think may have helped design that community currency, and Chad's in Barichara right now. Sure enough, I contacted Chad and it was the same one. And so we had a little small world moment as Nick came from Michigan. He's originally from Ohio. And Nick has worked for the Charles Mott Foundation for 22 years, helping set up community philanthropy projects all over Africa and Latin America. He's a really wonderful guy. And he was here just telling us how this community philanthropy works and what it felt like for him to be in the room with us when something magical happened. Which is that we made this decision uniformly, universally, that we would create a territorial foundation. And it was a moment of transcendence and integration. And I'll tell more of that story after the presentation because I want to be able to look you in the eyes as I tell it. But the important thing is that Territoria, which is supported by the Charles Mott Foundation, is able to provide administrative support and financial support. So they're going to give us support to create the foundation in its first year of existence on the scale of 20 or 30 million Colombian pesos, or about 8,000 US dollars. And they have an assessor, an accountant, a team of lawyers. They have a network of 40 advisors who work in social innovation and social entrepreneurship across Colombia that they collaborate with. And as our team made a universal agreement to move forward in creating a foundation, the afternoon was spent learning from Territoria what they could offer us because they're already funded to do it. We don't need to apply for anything. We're co-creating with them a network of 7 bioregional projects, 7 territories, each of which is creating its territorial foundation. And we're now actively co-creating together in that network as of yesterday. So it's no longer me posting a picture and a slide saying, we aspire to do this. As of yesterday, it's real and it's really happening. And now just a little bit about regenerative finance. Regenerative finance is taking place in 2 areas. One of them is what we're trying to bring here with our work for the Barichara Ecoversity and a regenerative finance satellite event that could take place in October. And another is the work that Earth Regenerators is doing with the Regen Foundation and some of the clarity that's starting to come from that. So what I want to say just as an update is that our idea of raising $300,000 to be able to complete the purchase of Las Albercas and run operations for 1 to 2 years for all of our learning centers that we're creating, including the work in syntropic agroforestry, that we're now up to 17 pledges. So it's grown a little bit. Each week there are a few more. And as we learn how to be pledge members, I've actually been negligent in gathering the pledge community and having our first meeting because I've just been so busy, but I do really aspire to do that quickly. The main reason I've been so busy is that my visa has now expired and I'm in a place of legal danger where Jessica, Elisa, and I may have to leave Colombia soon if we don't resolve a lot of really difficult bureaucratic issues. So about half of my time is spent on that each day as all of this is moving forward, which is why I've been delayed in gathering the pledge community. But in spite of that, we're nearly done with that visa work, thank goodness. And we'll soon be able to focus on this in earnest. But right now we have 17 pledges, which means we have $17,000 pledged. Some people have already given the money, others have promised to raise it. And we're entering into an exploratory process of design, participatory design, to create a relationship between the Barichara Ecoversity and the larger world. And it's in that context that these relationships are becoming more clear. So one thing is I received a fellowship from the Cello Foundation, which enabled me to pay for Charles Upton and Chad Monfreda to come to Barichara. And it also created a relationship where I'm starting a dialogue with the Cello Foundation. And I met with a member of their team the day before yesterday, a woman named Amy Cremens, who lives in London. And she's helping organize a regenerative finance event in Bogota during the DevCon event that's happening in October, or maybe it's in September. Antonio's here, he can remind me of the dates. I'm confused about 2 big events and they're a couple weeks apart. Like which one is which is the thing I'm confused about. But what's interesting is Cello is organizing a satellite event, meaning a salon focused on regenerative finance in Bogota. And so this woman I was introduced to through my connections in the foundation, she arrives to the conversation and just says, so I don't know anything about you or your background. What are we here to talk about? I was just told I'm supposed to talk to you. And then we spent a half an hour blowing her mind, overwhelming her, giving her a mission, as I told her about what we're doing. And it became very clear that as we create a regenerative finance retreat or escape or Woodstock-like concert gathering of people in Barichara in October, that the Cello Foundation will be an ally, that the core team at Cello, who do a lot of really good work in the Web3 crypto space, that they are very likely to come and be participants and learn with us. They're potential sponsors, and certainly we're going to co-design so that I can come and speak at their salon in Bogota, and that they can bring people who could film and document what we're doing in Barichara. And so while we're just beginning the dialogue, the idea of creating that regenerative finance event sandwiched between the two of the biggest crypto events in the world that are going to both take place in Colombia later this year, to attract all the regenerative finance people to Barichara, just became one step more real with this conversation with Cello. Another thing you should all know is that EcoStake, which is a validator, basically allowing people to take cryptocurrencies, very particular ones, and to do a validation that the blockchains are secure, which enables the infrastructure to work. They basically create security protocols for how the whole infrastructure has integrity. They have been giving some of their staking rewards, meaning that they generate cryptocurrency as they do this. They're sharing some of it with us for the Barichara Fund to support our on the ground work, but they're also an ally in building infrastructure within the Regen network. And so we've been talking with them about how to form these alliances. And so this dialogue about having a regenerative finance event connects to how do we partner with those who are part of the core technology infrastructure of alternative financial systems, which of course relates to the Regen Network and the Regen Foundation. And what I want to say for now is that the dialogues with the Regen Foundation have primarily been Lilian and myself having dialogues with the Regen Foundation team about why it's so difficult for us to set up our digital wallet and for the ER fund to receive 500,000 Regen tokens, because there are 8 communities receiving endowments of 500,000 tokens, and Earth Regenerators is one of them. It turns out this is a much thornier issue than any of us might have imagined. Lilian and I are scheduling a call with Jonathan to talk next week about what it would mean for Possible Planet to be a fiscal sponsor that receives cryptocurrency. And this is because none of the 8 communities knows how to navigate the legal frameworks of the formal institutions, which is nonprofit infrastructure and national governments, as they are trying to lock down, squeeze out, and destroy all the innovation of the crypto space. Like, for example, in India, nonprofits cannot receive cryptocurrency. It's illegal, it's against the law. So they have to find a fiscal sponsor that is not in India, partner with them, which is going to take a big portion of their cryptocurrency. And then that other nonprofit has to convert the cryptocurrency into fiat currency or nation state backed real, quote unquote, real currencies, and then send it to them so the tax documentation works. And this challenge of working within the extractive, destructive financial system and militarized nation states with national borders. Remember, that's what crypto was meant to undo, for those of you who know, was to create a financial infrastructure that was free from that. Well, the problem is the Regen Foundation is a nonprofit based in Texas, in the United States, and they cannot give valuable assets to an entity that is not a nonprofit. Because we talked about whether they could just give it to me as a private individual, and I could take the legal risk of receiving it, which means I might have to pay taxes or other things, and then for me to just give the money to the Earth Regenerators Fund. And it turns out it's not that simple. And this challenge of navigating between the fact that the Regen Foundation is captured by being established as a nonprofit organization in the United States, that their legal protections require that anyone on the other end of a contract fits within the bounds of US nonprofit law, creates this intersection between the crypto world and the formalized world of nation states and financial systems, which breaks down and undermines a lot of the innovation that we're trying to do. And what we're realizing is this is just a huge learning process, and receiving and using the Regen tokens is the smallest of our interest at the moment. And this deeply relates to the Regen Network and to other groups that are trying to build infrastructure for ecosystem services, for community land trusts, like the Regenerative Community Land Trust Group based in Colorado, and others that we're playing with. And all of us are talking about how this relates to the work in Barichara, the work in Earth Regenerators, the work of the Regen Foundation. Notice that it's multi-directional and it doesn't land anywhere on Earth. It doesn't land in the soil on the ground, which is why we have to figure out, using the Regen Foundation and the ER Fund as our learning space, how the hell do we navigate this? And this is exactly why we need this Regenerative Finance Satellite event in October, to bring all of the people in the Web3 and crypto space who work on regenerative finance to Barichara, to walk them around the territory and visit some of our regenerative and reforestation projects, explore what we're doing with the Territorial Foundation, talk about what's happening in Earth Regenerators and the Regen Foundation, and figure this out. And so I just want to share with you that this huge learning is happening. It touches everything we're doing from all directions, but it's mostly invisible. It's mostly invisible. And it's like an invisible, like a, I don't know, like a vampire octopus or a vampire squid spreading its tendrils and trying to kill and siphon life out of everything. Well, we're trying to do the opposite. Like mycelium, we're trying to spread the signaling and communication of value to everything we touch. And so all of this is happening. Damn, is it complicated? Damn, is it complex? We have no idea how it's going to play out. And so I'm going to stop there so that I can see you guys and you can see me. I just wanted to share with you, this is what's happening. And as we try to navigate all of these issues, like, there's so much learning. And in my mind, every bit of this is the ecoversity. How to create the Territorial Foundation is adults learning community governance. That's part of the ecoversity. What Lilian and I are doing with Regen Foundation is not separate from the ecoversity. Doesn't matter if it's in Barichara or not. And so that's our mess. I have a story to tell about what happened yesterday, but I want to save it and like allow a little time for questions and clarifying before I go into it. Maybe I'll share it as the way we close. Because I just hit you all with a lot. So I'd love to just invite some conversation. Like, are there questions? Are there comments? Things you'd like to focus in on? Urvi, please.
Thank you for that. In the complex maze that you described under the regenerative finance umbrella, and there's a lot of moving pieces, and I really appreciate you taking the time to explain that. Where within that are you seeing, what do you feel most optimistic about, and what do you have the greatest concerns about in terms of things actually coming to fruition?
Those are good questions. Where I see the greatest promise is the blending of pro-social groups and on-the-ground cooperation. So it's like the community land trusts and these regenerative land bank kinds of ideas. Like look at the way we talk about Las Albercas, how Las Albercas holds connectivity to other things. It's an anchor piece of land, or the Bioparque is an existing example, right? It's a piece of community land that is anchoring a syntropic agroforestry field site along with a bunch of other things. And so this blend of how do we create pro-social governance, or Eleanor Ostron's kind of commons-based governance in real practice, together with on-the-ground integration, where pieces of land become the anchors for that integration. I think that's where the greatest promise is. And so when people are talking about crypto or anything else, doesn't matter what else, if it's not connected to real groups of people on real pieces of land, they're at least one step removed from what we need to be doing. And that doesn't make it bad. It just means they need to keep moving toward getting there. And that's where I see the greatest promise, which is why if we could get the regenerative finance community in the crypto world, if we could gather 500 or 1,000 of them in Barichara for a week and walk them around the territory, like if we visited Las Albercas, showed them the neighboring land, came to the Bioparque, showed them how we're creating territorial governance, and said, now what? I think a lot of light bulbs would click, because they would see how the community governance and the land relate to each other in a way that's sort of undeniably contextual. So they would just stop designing outside of context or at least enough of them would. That's where I think the most promise is. Now, the most danger is wherever we don't do that. The most danger is wherever something in our bodies blocks us from going into the messiness of real context. Whatever blocks us, that's where, so, and almost all of that is going to be trauma, psychological patterns of avoidance, returning to old habits, diversion, denial, distraction, overwhelm, all that stuff is where I think our biggest problem is. And the world's so fucked up right now. We're all feeling the craziness and the freneticness within ourselves and among the people around us. We're definitely mapping that in the learning journey right now. That in our host team call this week, we talked a lot. Everyone was feeling it. Like me having dog poop on my shoe, like just surprising disruptions everywhere. I sort of named that not as a joke, but as a real observation. So that's where I think our greatest challenges are, is the whole thing can fall apart, or the whole thing is any whole thing, wherever that's not being addressed and integrated. Midi.
Thank you.
Well, I feel the whole thing holds together through relationship. And I'm wondering if the complexity that you've outlined around this whole crypto story can throw some light on a message I received yesterday out of the blue from a very disappointed Diogo, who named himself as being disappointed in being offered funding for his regenerative garden journals project and not receiving it. And I responded to him, and through I just simply tried to track back what had happened. So I tracked back through our notes in the fund meetings and established that I thought the last connection was you and Diogo, and that I'd heard something about Diogo wanting to receive his funding, which we'd offered in fiat, in crypto. And so I asked Diogo about this, and he said, yes, there had been a conversation, and that you'd said you didn't have enough Ethereum to pay the transaction fees. But I'm wondering whether it was that or something about the actual practicality of the fund. What's interesting to me is that Diogo would like to see a collective fund. So kind of beyond, I feel there's something to facilitate with the relationship quite clearly. And I don't know where to unpick it, but maybe there's a conversation to be had again, to be picked up between you and Diogo, Joe. But it seems to me that given his passion for crypto and this whole question of how we get the money to Diogo, maybe the way forward is for him to be in Barichara in October for this gathering, because I sense he could really be somebody to drive this. At the moment, we have a disappointed Diego who says, I don't feel, I'm not able to fully dedicate to the network. And maybe there's a crisis that can be turned into a great opportunity to bring Diogo in more directly.
Yeah, this is a really important topic because there were two things that happened in that situation with Diogo. One was he asked for the money in crypto at a time when the crypto was collapsing, which means the amount of money we offered in fiat was like doubling and tripling. So instead of giving him $1,000 and whatever it was, would have been $3,000 or $4,000 equivalent in crypto, simply because he wanted an Ethereum and Ethereum was dropping. And so the agreement we had at the time was, if he wants it in crypto, we need to wait for the crypto to recover to basically restore parity to what it would have been worth at the time that the fiat was offered. And so that was already one place where the turbulence in the crypto markets was taking his desire. And what would have happened is I was holding some cryptocurrency given to me in December that I was going to use to pay off. I have 0 interest loans from people for Oriental Agua. And I had the amount of it I needed in Ethereum. But then Ethereum fell to 15% of its value, which means I'm going to have to raise money to pay off Oriental Agua because I no longer have it. And giving him that money would become the equivalent of me paying him 4 times as much as we'd agreed, just by using the new value exchange after it had plummeted. And that really reveals the problem of moving between currencies. Because each currency is based on its own trust security. A dollar is worth, US dollar is worth this much milk, whereas 1 Ethereum is worth this much milk. And within, it's self-contained in its value, but the interchange between them is where that trust system just in the currencies themselves is not maintained. And so part of it was, when we talked about this, I was in Boulder at Penny's place before she'd come here. It was 2 months ago that he had asked me to pay it in crypto. And I was like, well, all the crypto is dropping. Let's wait until it stabilizes. And what ended up happening was we just never got back to a place of returning to say, shall I just give it to you in fiat after all? We had a few weeks of exchange and then it just sort of, got lost in the background a little bit, which is where we need to pick it back up again and restore. And there was a moment where I was going to pay him in Ethereum, but I didn't have enough Ethereum to cover what's called the gas fees, which is, there's this interesting thing that anytime you check something on the blockchain and move it around, there's a computational cost. And that's called the gas fee. At least that's what you pay as a small amount of the token to be able to make that transaction occur, to update the values in the blockchain. And Ethereum's gas fees went really high. So something that like moving $1,000 equivalent in Ethereum, which actually had become $4,000 or $5,000 because Ethereum had dropped, also included something like, instead of being $1 for that transaction, it became $500 because the gas fees were so high. And so this volatility was in both parts, and that I didn't have enough Ethereum to cover the gas fee to send him the money without receiving more Ethereum, which means I'd have to go and turn fiat into Ethereum just to have Ethereum in my wallet so that I could then have enough to make the transaction. And all of this sort of gummed it up for me to send him the money at the time. And it just shows how when we move between currencies, so much breaks down right now. It's a surprisingly complex space because these seemingly simple acts don't have integrity. So what I think we need to do with Diogo is since he's already talking to you, it'd be beautiful if you could just facilitate bringing him back to me as a trust building bridge for us to come back and restore that. I can reach out to him, but I actually think it'd be better if we do it together. It'll represent the ER fund better if we do it together. And I love your idea of, we're also doing syntropic agroforestry here, which is what he does as well. So there are various connections for that piece. For whatever we might do together with this event in October, I don't know. But we could talk to him about it at the time. And during that conversation, we could see if he would accept it in fiat because the crypto has just stayed collapsed. And Ethereum is still at 15% the value it was a few months ago. And doesn't seem to be going up anytime soon, or at least we can't predict it. But I don't know, is that helpful, Midi, before we go on to Gail? Is that helpful for now?
It's helpful. I see Gail and I'm wondering if she wants to speak to it because I know that she had a piece in the Diego story.
Please, Gail.
No, I just wanted to let you know that he also reached out to me and I said I was going to reach out to you. So Mitty beat me to the punch. So just so you know the background that he also reached out to me. That's all.
That makes sense.
And thank you. Yeah, thank you for the explanation. So I feel it'd be better for you to explain because boy, it's already like whoosh.
Yeah, Diogo knows all this stuff because he knows the crypto world well. So yeah. I think it's just that it may seem I've forgotten. And in a way, in a practical sense, I have, because I know I need to do it, but also I don't have a good way to do it unless we went back to fiat. And I've just been so busy focused in other places that in a practical sense, you could say I've forgotten, and it's not untrue. I haven't proactively returned to him. So I think this intervention is a beautiful one. Thank you, Mitty, and thank you, Gail. And I think it
Thank
does
you,
show
Mitty.
how,
Yeah.
I think it does show all of this is connected. It really is all connected. Are there other questions or comments before I tell this story? Things people would like to say about the raising of children, about the work of Syntropy with the Territorial Foundation, or just in general?
I want to raise something really quick. So I'm a bit under the weather, and so I was completely overwhelmed by all the information. I feel like it was drinking from a fire hose. I'm going to review this video, and usually I review videos at 1.5 speed. I think I'm going to review this one at 0.5 speed to try to take it all in. But I'm just really trying to feel into, you know, with whatever I was able to gather, my initial feelings. And I just, given my own sense of overwhelm in hearing the presentation, I'm just wondering, how are you feeling? It seems like there's a lot going on. Do you need anything? And Penny, maybe, yeah, you can chime in as well. But is there anything that we can do to help you to balance the burden a little bit? Because it does seem like a lot, and maybe when the visas figure it out, you'll be able to handle it all. But I just want to hear behind the scenes, how's Joe doing?
I love to, you want me to do it?
Yeah, you should answer for yourself.
I can.
Yeah.
I just love watching you see it. So it's, I'm not used to having someone who sees how I'm actually doing. So it's kind of amazing to have Penny here. And I mean that in like 17 different ways. It's sort of amazing. What I do is so distributed that almost no one can see it. So to have someone who's seeing it with me is a life-changing difference. And by the way, Jessica couldn't see it. Couldn't see enough of it to be helpful in that way. Even though I was with her for 18 years and love her very much, she was mostly lost in what was happening to me. One thing I can say is that this week, and some of you are part of it, a very special support group has formed around me and my needs. That is also exploring how to do collective sense making. And which is just to say that I'm aware that I have needs and have been reaching out for help. Just so you all know, I'm not a stoic, rugged individual about this. I'm often confused about how I can get help. Like, who could help me when I'm so immersed in it? It's sort of difficult to know. But having other people bear witness really makes a huge difference. Simply not feeling alone in it is like night and day. The way I would describe it is like this. When I get spread really thin, like when I'm working across 30 or 40 groups at the same time, two things happen. Pathologies of wetiko, that sort of illusion of separation, where people see one little piece and they can't see the rest, so they can't understand what's happening to me, and they start projecting their own concerns and their own fears, that has started happening. And that has happened before, so it's something I'm really familiar with. So handling the stress of everyone else, not everyone else, other people who project their problems and their difficulties onto me because they don't understand what I'm doing. When I'm in a place where I have to make choices that hurt people, and I have a whole explanation I could give about that, but just saying I have to choose things that support the whole network, but sometimes it has harms in subparts of the network, and that's not visible or understandable. That creates a lot of stress and pain for me, in addition to the stress and pain it causes for those people. So some of that is happening now, and has been for about a month. And so navigating that has been wonderful to have Penny here. The other part I think it's really important is how important it is to do distributed storytelling. Like, I don't know if you've all noticed that there are still stories coming from Earth Regenerators here in Barichara about what's happening here, but there's less than there was. And actually, very interestingly, you might notice no one else from the ER group that's in Barichara is on this call today. They all went swimming and took a day trip. And they have completely separated themselves from my flow of work, make no effort to engage me or be a part of it, including Charles, who came to work on Las Albercas with me, is independently doing his own work in the territory. And I have released and liberated them to do it. And there are very important ways that specific people who are here right now cannot handle the complexity of me as I'm doing this. There are some who can. I'm not going to name them because I don't want to go into that game. But I just want to say that having people helping tell the story from different perspectives, like, I don't know if you all remember, Pamela, I'm going to use you as my little example, if that's okay. When Rachel started doing her videos of walking around with the phone and telling stories, for some reason that really helped Pamela. Something about the way that Rachel told the stories was like, wow, I see the bioparking in a totally different way. And what's interesting is Rachel was saying things I've said just the way Rachel does. And that was just what Pam needed. And so I can't predict ahead of time whose story needs to land with different people. And I really need other people telling parts of the story, because I cannot tell the story aside from the way that I do. And there's a strength to it and there's an Achilles heel to it. And so what I really need help with is people just being compassionate with me as I'm doing this, and more storytellers telling it in their own way. That really, it's hard to describe how many ways that helps. And so as we're doing this work, it's just going to become more and more important that the people who might be storytellers don't stop being storytellers. And so that's something, I don't know if that helps, Benji, but I know as you've been, put in the role of storyteller for Glenn's work, you can feel some of how that tension plays out. It can be really difficult to be in these roles without really understanding the person and what they're going through. And so, that's where I really need the most help, is the holding of the complexity in the story by other people telling the story, so I can just keep doing what I do, just weaving it in ways that most people can't understand. I need to be forgiven for not being understandable while I'm doing it. And it's not because I'm smart. I am smart, but that's not what this is. This is without the familiarity of all the parts, you can't understand. And by the time you learn them, they will all have changed. And so it's really a problem of learnability. There is no practical dynamic way to learn it, because by the time you've learned part of it, another part's changed. And so I'm in a perpetual dance of emergence, just dancing with the changes on all these different fronts. Which again was my little joke about dog poop on my sandal. I just have to react whatever's in the moment. It's very Buddhist.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that helps.
Well, thank you for that. And it brings up a bit of a reflection from me and my experience here with Glenn, and not to seem like I'm branding this bioregional apprentice concept, but I think it's a valuable frame as we move around and try to learn from people who are already doing the bioregional weaving. And I think that one of the important things to understand and practices we can engage in as we do go to these places, that people are already on the ground, already really integrated and part of these complex dynamic processes, that there's a wayfinding process. There's a process of landing and really being patient and still and taking the time to understand what's going on, and continually and recognizing that there's going to be assumptions that both sides have that need to be revealed. And those are going to be the source of so much tension and so much conflict. No matter how much you think ahead of time, it's just going to be dandy. We come from such separation from our own stories. I just think that's a really important part of it. And then having some practice of returning to just an open conversation and having that pro-social intent and uncovering those tensions and moving forward. So I think this is really valuable learnings.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
Super valuable. And I've found that there is a profound qualitative difference between the people that come to Barichara because they're in a deep personal life transformation and people that think they're just coming to help with the work. And the thing is, they often themselves do not know which they would be before they arrive. And their actual spiritual work is a surprise to everyone, especially them. Like, I watched Rachel when she was here for 2 months. She went through an incredible, truly incredible spiritual awakening but it was messy and nonlinear. And she was sort of a jerk to people during that time because she was stressed and overwhelmed. Some of you will remember in the ER fund governance groups, there were times that she was like impatient and snappy and irritable because she was seeing things differently from what was happening to her here. And I know, because I was here with her, I could see the other side of it. That wasn't about anything happening in those Zoom rooms. It was just about what was happening to her. And the whole context was so immersive. There would be no way to understand it without being there in the Bio Parque with her every day. And so, and I notice almost within a few days, people who come here, if they're here for the deep spiritual work or not. And I can only attend to the deep spiritual people, meaning the others actually, I rub them in a way that is dysfunctional for both directions. I need like a welcoming committee for the people who are coming here to volunteer. And then I need to have mentorship and other kinds of deep relationships with the people here for the spiritual work. And I did that in the last 2 weeks with Stephen being here for the deep spiritual work while mostly not engaging with the other earth regenerators who are here. And it was just, it evolved that way. But this subtlety is invisible. And it's not something to, it's not advertisable or anything. So it's very, very subtle, but it's deeply important. I don't know if you have anything you wanted to share or not.
Well, I mean, the one thing I'm thinking about is like coming, at least in Barichara, there's kind of like different approaches like Joe's describing and of people as they're arriving. And if like the important part of it is to actually integrate in with the community. But if you come in thinking, well, I'm just going to be in like this isolated group and we'll do work together and I'm not going to feel the land necessarily or come into the community necessarily. So there's like these different kind of approaches. But here in Barichara, it's all embedded in one. As you know, as Joe's describing, the Territorial Foundation, the syntropic agroforestry group are all local people. So it takes time. It would take a lot of time to really integrate into the community and to have that intention. And that's actually what's needed is that kind of deep integration into the community. So that's what's coming up for me. That feels, I can see like that some people are oriented that way and some people aren't who are coming here.
Yeah, and it's important to say it's not a value judgment. It's not good or bad, but phenomenologically, you feel the difference. Like they don't feel the same, which is helpful because then you can detect it. And then we can actually create support structures for the different kinds. So everyone has a good experience. But this is so different from like coming to a permaculture center and getting a PDC. What we're doing is so different because of the territorial patterning that there's really not a recognizable mental model to prepare people before they arrive. But it really works powerfully for the people who are seeking that deep, when they're in their own deep journey, the healing power of this place works for them. And if they're not, then they're sort of, it's almost like the territory buffers itself in a dynamic sense. Pamela, please.
You mentioned earlier something about xenophobia as being something that has manifested in the region and the fires that were being set. I'm wondering if this intersects something of what you're talking about with integrating with the community and whether or not whether there are trust issues between the people who arrive and the community people. And then tagged on to that, Penny, one of the outstanding things about your first arrival was not being able to speak the language. And that certainly makes it difficult to integrate into the community. So how does that blend work out for you or for Barichara?
Well, one thing to know about Barichara is that the indigenous people of this region were one of the strongest resistors, the strongest resistance against the conquistadors. They fought bravely and ferociously and actually committed suicide rather than being conquered. And so the endogenous cultural resonance, meaning the kind of people that live in this difficult landscape, this is a difficult landscape. kind of people, it's like the Bedouin people, if you think in the Middle East, that people who live in difficult landscapes are strong people. And so the local people are strong people. But part of the way they're so strong is that they're clan-based. So here, think like Scotland, you know, that whichever coat of arms hangs up above your fireplace is whose side you die and kill for. They're very clan-based here historically. And there was a very strong violence that happened between the 1960s and the 1990s between the liberals and conservatives, which is those who wanted independence from the crown and those who didn't. But then, you know, after independence, they still maintained this for more than a century. And so the xenophobia comes about from a fear of outsiders that is a protection of that clan. And it's not strongly expressed in the majority of people. It's not like the majority of people are this way. It's just that there are some people who are this way, but those people who are this way can react with violence. And so one thing that's happened, for those of you who don't know this story, is 2 months ago, there were a series of 4 intentional fires in the Bioparque. 2 of them occurred before I left for Colorado, and 2 of them occurred while I was in Colorado. But what you probably don't know is that the association that owns the Bioparque, the executive committee of that association, had a meeting where they declared that I was the most likely suspect, even though I was in Colorado during 2 of the fires, and that I was drug trafficking and doing satanic rituals and who knows what in the Bioparque, and they wanted to report me to the police commandant and have me arrested. And they wanted to do this with 0 evidence. And just so you know, the president of this executive committee has never been to the Bioparque even once in the 14 years of existence of the Bioparque. And he lives in the middle of town. He could walk there in 2 minutes. And in 14 years, he's never gone. So this is like exemplary of closed-minded, ignorant xenophobia. They have no interest in reality, only about protecting themselves in some deep way. And that was where there were like 3 people on the executive committee who made these outlandish accusations. I was in Colorado during 2 of them. How could I have started the fires? Reality didn't matter. And then the other half of the executive committee were all champions of the Bioparque. And probably, we don't know for sure, so this is just in the realm of suspicion, probably I was being targeted this way because of the political activities of Camila and Vicky. And by attacking me, they're hurting Camila and Vicky. And it wasn't even about me. It's just, this is part of the nuances of some of the local culture and its politics. And so when we talk about Earth Regenerators coming here and being involved in the Territorial Foundation, we're not talking about this part. We're not talking about some of the deepest local culture and its legitimate concern about violence from outsiders. I mean, remember, the genocide was extreme here and successful. And so the xenophobia comes from a real place, even though it's a cultural remnant and an intergenerational trauma. So people coming here and not connecting into the community is not really about this part of it. It'd be more like, do they talk to Margarita, who's bilingual and her husband's Scottish, you know, and their son is bilingual, and get connected to the work she's doing in the community, even if they don't speak Spanish? Do they meet Tanya and Ceci, who both are bilingual and speak English just fine and are helping lead the work in syntropic agroforestry? Or do they just like meet amongst themselves? Like a revealing example was Alpha being here. Alpha came because he wanted to connect with Charles more, not really because of Earth Regenerators. And Alpha and I have been friends for years, but he didn't really know what we were doing. And Alpha said, he doesn't come to the Bioparque because we go there every day. Said if we scheduled it once a week and everyone's going to gather for like a specific work party, he'd go. But because his other work with the Regenerative Water Alliance is what's really important to him, it's not important to him to come every day and form a deep connection to the land. He didn't come here for that. And notice there's absolutely nothing wrong with Alpha for being that way. If you guys read the articles Alpha's writing and the things he's learning, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. But he is not seeking that connection into the community. And like I said, no criticism, but just to observe the difference is like Sebastian, when he came here, he wanted to work with families to raise their children. He's deeply integrating himself into the community from day one. because that was his intent. And it's this kind of a distinction that is so subtle, but really important. So is this revealing a little bit more of the nuance of this part of the story? Antonio, please. Oh no, we still can't hear you.
Oh,
You're in an airplane. No, we still can't hear you. There you go. Now I can hear you. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just really curious, and I think the curiosity is kind of like on the edge of both concern and curiosity. It's like dancing in the middle, and talking about this refi event in October, and having feet in one foot in the crypto world and one foot in the regenerative permaculture world, and the spiritual awakening that you've been discussing about spending time in Barichara. And this isn't more of a question, but maybe just saying, bringing a lot of these refi people. Who do we want to bring? Why are they there? And the intimate knowledge of a lot of these refi communities projects are still coming from a place of deep embedded Wedico separation. So keeping that in mind, and then it's like a microcosm, and then looking at the other side of what will this reveal about the xenophobia in the community. And I'm just really excited and curious to see this come to fruition, simply for the fact that a lot of the refi community and crypto community especially needs a lot of deep inner healing around money trauma as well. And I'm even with Jogo, I want to help to be a bridge with that as well, because he's doing a lot of great work with the new initiative with the agroforestry DAO, which is basically using NFTs as a way to catalog learning journeys for syntropic agroforestry. So I think there's a lot of projects out there that are grounded in trying to attract those builders. And yeah, just kind of excited to see what happens, knowing full well that there's a lot of trauma to address. And I think, maybe the most powerful thing to do is we can, leave a lot of that debilitating habits behind us. So thank you, Joe, for sharing all of that backstory. And I know that there's a lot of work that needs to be done around the planning and the execution of that event in October. But from my point of view, it just seems like it's really divine timing in terms of how all of these things are coming together. The interest from the traditional crypto community and refi is kind of taking everybody's imagination by storm. And especially as we've had it's funny because it's not even a crypto collapse. It was the most degenerate of the actors in the crypto space got cleaned out. That's what's happened. And as we continue moving forward, the people who are actually putting in the work in both the crypto permaculture communities are going to be seen and rewarded and recognition. So I'm just kind of excited to see how this all evolves. And this new moon in Cancer is definitely a time for radical honesty. And I think that's what's the medicine that we need right now. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. I think when I think about how to focus on who to bring here, I would say if we use the Regen Network's idea of ecological state variables, just as an abstract term that's in the crypto world. So people are tracking carbon credits, biodiversity credits, reforestation work, watershed restoration and water retention, those ecological state variables. So I'm just using that as like a category of conversation. Anyone who is working in the realm of crypto that is interested in measurable ecological restoration, that these would be target people. And also anyone who's interested in cooperation and community governance and governing the commons. I think those two will help us know how to signal with our storytelling who to invite. So like the Regenerative Community Land Trust Group in Colorado is an exemplary concept, meaning they are attempting both of those things. Gregory Landaway from Regen Network exemplifies both those things. So I think we just need a good way of understanding there's a convergence of, like, it's a story that we need to be able to tell easily. Those who are using the Web3 and crypto world to figure out how to help cooperation arrive on the land to create ecological restoration. And that would be a, I don't know if that's not the wording, but I think you get what I'm getting at, that would anchor enough. Because like talking to that woman, Amy at Cello, it hadn't even occurred to her that having an event in Barichara would be worth the time because people would actually walk the land. She was just like, wow, that seems like a big commitment to get people to spend 8 hours in a bus to come to Barichara. I mean, we're gonna have a hard time getting them across town in Bogota to come to our event. And I'm like, well, anyone who's not gonna take the 8-hour bus ride, we don't want them anyway. Like, you know, anyone who doesn't get the importance of walking in the bioparque or going to Agua Santa, where they can see we actually have a watershed restoration project with regenerative agroforestry, and we can take them to it and teach them. And my friend Carlos, who was in one of the pictures earlier, could show them how we're doing it. And we can translate for him because his English isn't very good. And the power of standing inside those projects, it just changes so much for those who don't get it yet. That I think we more or less know how to focus. You know, we need to talk to each other to name the focus together, but I think we'll find it pretty quickly. Because I know we're at an hour and a half right now. And I'd love to just tell the story of what happened yesterday, and I'll keep it fairly brief. Even though I could actually talk about it for a half an hour pretty easily, I won't. But I want to just give you a feeling of why this decision to create a territorial foundation is such a big deal and how it happened. And I want to start by saying that in August of 2020, 3 things happened for me. One was I visited the land that became Origen del Agua, and the land spoke to me, and I started raising money for it, and then beginning the decolonization of the purchase of the land. The second thing was I was invited into the conflict around Las Albercas and visited that land for the first time. So both of those pieces of land I was introduced to in August of 2020. And I immediately started telling the story that we needed to create a foundation that could own Origen del Agua if we bought the land. So I've been talking about creating a foundation since August of 2020. And I could have created one. It's not hard to file the paperwork. But it became really clear in the first few months that it needed to be a foundation owned and collectively created within the community. So taking almost 2 years to get to the point where we're ready to begin creating the foundation indicates how much focus on the culture really is important. It's really, really important. And so what happened yesterday was, like, there was a moment where I said, December 11th, last year, I was in Santa Marta and I was completely converted to territorial foundations. I've waited from then till now for all of you to be ready. And by the way, I've been raising money and paying people to do work since January. Because for those of you who remember, we raised $18,000 in January to fund Margarita. I've been quietly funding Margarita, holding tax burdens and all kinds of weird stuff on myself. The reason my visa is a mess right now is I'm paying people who are not on my payroll, not paying taxes on them, moving the money through my for-profit business for my visa, because I don't have a nonprofit entity in Colombia that can receive and manage the money. And I've stayed in that messy place for this long because I'm waiting for the community to agree to create a nonprofit together. And it took them almost 2 years. So this is a really big deal that we got to this place. But there was something that happened. That is that we had 3 workshops. The last one was on June 18th. On the June 18th workshop, we divided into 3 work groups. One of those work groups was the group that agreed to go through the steps of creating the legal entity of a territorial foundation. And we had like 6 bullet points. Every single bullet point mentioned territorial foundations. And in that group, or in that workshop, we had a consensus agreement of every other group, every participant universally agreed that we would create a territorial foundation. But yesterday, in the moment where we said, we all agreed to create a territorial foundation, half the people who were there were like, no, we didn't. We need to make a decision together. And then Natalia, who had made detailed notes, word for word, opened up her phone, went to the Google Doc where she'd written them down, and read word for word what we had agreed to Territorial Foundation was approved 6 times. And she just asked, I want to know what kinds of internal psychological resistance exist that even after we all agreed on June 18th, that half of you don't remember we agreed. And then once that was on the table, we all started talking about it. And we agreed that we needed to agree together again. And then we did a hand raising. 2 hands up like this means we're excited. 1 hand up means I don't have any objection. 2 hands crossed means it's consent-based decision-making. 2 hands crossed means I have a problem or I have an objection. All hands went up and the energy of the room was completely transformed. And we started feeling celebration and release.
Can I see it?
Not right now, sweetie. And I'm gonna be off my call in just a minute. And that's when people started feeling into deep personal life transformational changes, which I felt embodied because I know these people so well. I felt different people like reorienting the rest of their lives in the moment of commitment to a life of work of creating territorial governance together. And this patterning of people not remembering they had agreed, and then us naming it and confronting that, and then dispelling it together opened up a depth of connection that I just don't know how to describe. And I'm still holding and processing. And so, like I said, I'm going to keep it short. I won't go into detail because I have personal stories about different people I could name about the significance of this. But there was something truly incredible because in that moment, the man Augustine, who I told you has helped set up 30 or 40 community foundations, said he's only been in the room for the birth of 2, the 2 that he helped found. And this is the first time he was in the presence of one being founded that someone else was creating. And he wrote a poem while we were making the decision. And he started to weep with his whole body. And then he read the poem to us. And it was just like sprinkling love juice. It was like this medicine on all of us for 40 years of his life work to bear witness to what we were doing. And we could all feel the significance of it. It was a spiritual moment. And that's why it might seem, yeah, you've been doing this for 2 years. Okay, you made the decision. We all agreed. This is something else. This process, this feeling, the lived experience is truly something else. And I just wanted to share that to say, as of yesterday, we have a group that is committed for the rest of our lives to regenerating this territory. We decided where we were planting our bones together. It was a community rite of passage, completely unexpected. And that's the story I wanted to tell. So while that xenophobic thing is happening and these other sort of breakdown sort of things are happening, something truly amazing is being born. And I just wanted to share that with you guys to say how special this is. And like I'm processing it. I don't know what to make of it yet. Spent all morning doing stuff for the visa and preparing for our conversation today. And making time for Elise. But this is such a big deal and it's not quantifiable. But it's I think that shift in us was the most important thing that happened yesterday. Probably the most important thing that will happen this year. And most people will not even know, there'll be no visible measure of it, but it's in our bodies and our relationship to each other has changed. And so I wanted to share that and have you all just be connected to it for a moment. Now I know we've gone for a long time. So I want to thank you all for being here this long. And I'll get the video posted on YouTube and make it available to others. I want to encourage you, any of you who feel like there's someone you should share any of these calls with to help them understand what's going on and get them involved. If you want to do your own storytelling to help us understand from your perspective, your relationship to all of this, that's going to be really, really helpful. And so I feel you, I know our togetherness. So thank you, everyone.
You too.